Welcome to the webinar. We have Gary here who is going to be talking about a very interesting topic today, right? So he's talking about how L&D teams or learning and development teams are using a data-driven approach. So the topic by far, what we're going to discuss is the data-driven L&D, measuring impact for business success. So Gary, would you be able to give a quick introduction about yourself and what you do and how you've come across this whole realm of L&D and how you've become a consultant to a lot of companies that way, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Andre, for having me on to chat. Yeah, everybody, my name's Gary Denardo. I'm here right now. I work for a company called LearnUpon, which is a learning management system that really, if you don't know what a learning management system is, an LMS, it really houses all of your learning and development content in
Mhm.
one easy one-stop shop for all your learners, no matter their needs. And my role here at LearnUpon is as a senior strategic customer success manager. So I work with our our strategic customers here at LearnUpon, which are really having some of the most complex use cases with the learning and development needs. And
Mhm.
my goal is to really help them understand the product, help them get what they want out of the product, and really get the results that they
Mhm.
want, the really business-driven results that can impact the bottom line in some way out of a learning program that they're running.
That's nice. That's nice. Thank you so much, Gary, for the introduction, right? And you did mention that you work with a lot of L&D teams, and that's what this whole discussion is about, right? Now, I have a question, which is like, in your experience, Gary, right, working with L&D professionals, right? What do you think are some of the biggest challenges they face in demonstrating the value? Because the topic that we are discussing is how can L&D teams demonstrate value to the organization or to the business, right? So what is the biggest challenge that they face in demonstrating the value to the organization?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And it's one that pretty much every single learning and development team that I run into has as this challenge. It's not if you're struggling with it, it is by no means unique to you.
Mhm.
It's because often it's really hard to quantify learning as having an impact on business. And when I say like impact on business, I really think about it in three different ways. I think, all right, how is learning either increasing your revenue, either decreasing your cost, or reducing risk in some way?
Right.
And L&D teams, I think, struggle with quantifying that to say, all right, when learners do X training, this is when, like, let's give it an example. When sales professionals have to take sales training,
Mhm.
then by doing the sales training, this is making them, let's say, 20% more efficient at their job, which is increasing their sales targets by 10%. And it's really often really hard for L&D teams to kind of trace that and connect the dots there, or even to say this does have an impact in some way. So I say that is probably the biggest challenge. And that's currently one of the ways that I really partner with our customers to really help them connect the dots there.
Understood, understood. So when you say that it is difficult for the L&D team to kind of quantify, in your example, you mentioned, say, to quantify the results of those particular programs that they're running, right? Do you see, I understand that you kind of help them to kind of look at measuring it and showing that this is what we did, right? And so one of the major things that we see with L&D teams is that they only track their course completion rates. So they do a program, they look at, okay, how many people completed, they give a report saying that these many X people completed. And that's what we are talking about, right? What next after that? What metrics do you recommend L&D teams or professionals track to showcase the real impact of their initiatives?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think completion rates are really the starting point because
Mhm.
we can't ignore completion. We can't say there 0% is the same as 100% completion, but really that is the starting point to your point, Andre. And we have to say, all right, what's next? So one of the ways that we can say like what's next, I'll is tying it to outcomes. So having like a group looking at the groups that really didn't complete their training, not necessarily saying don't put your sales teams like through training and that put one part of the sales team through it, the other part not through it. But you can really see completion. You can gauge completion rates for both for folks, and you could really tie it to say, all right, those that completed 0% of this sales training, this is how much this is their close rates for Q1 versus the folks that did all the sales training. This is their close rates for Q1, and then you kind of track it across quarter to quarter. And, honestly, there might not be a correlation there, and if there's not, that really does say something about your training. That's feedback for your training too, to say, oh, maybe I could be making better training, or maybe I could be outsourcing this to other folks to help me to like really draw a correlation between like those that didn't do the training, the folks that did do the training really did have it did have a measurable impact on their success as sales reps. So I think it's really taking the next step as to what does completion rates mean? Why is that important? And really just iterating, because nobody's gonna be perfect the first time that they're trying to iterate and trying to drive results with their programs. But you just want to take that next step to say, all right, how can we connect the dots there?
Understood, understood. That's an interesting point, Gary, because sometimes what happens is that the L&D team thinks that, okay, they have to deliver the training and that's it, right? So what you're saying is that to tie them with the certain metrics from the team that they're delivering it to. For example, in your example, you said the sales team and the close rate and possibly the attainment of individual sales agent is something that you look at. And what you're saying is that not just the completion rate, track that as well to see what is the effect of the training or what is the end result of the training. Now, when you're saying that there's no correlation, that would mean that the trainings that is being delivered might not be effective, right? So in this case, when you're tying it with those metrics, the L&D team gets a leeway to kind of understand, okay, these are my development programs, so these are trainings that is not really affecting or impacting, making any impact on the team, which means that there's no point in doing this. I need to redesign this training or redesign this entire course or redesign. If it's an LMS, I need to completely redesign and do a better iteration of it, which is more result oriented. So, which means that if they're tying it to those metrics, they have a way to continuously improve upon whatever development plans that they are trying to deliver. Is that something that you're trying to convey, Gary?
Yeah, I think that really nails it on the head of like they want to be able to connect that to say like, all right, maybe my training's not great, like
Mhm.
that, which is often like the case. Everybody needs, it's okay to fail, I think, to say I need to iterate on this to make this better. And I think one of the best ways to do that is through feedback,
Mhm.
especially in the courses. Like your data will tell you if you need to change that training, but also if you put course feedback surveys at the end of your courses, your learners will tell you that. And then like in this example with sales leaders you could work with the sales leaders to say what competencies or what things are you not do you think that your sales team needs to get better at, and help build that training alongside of them and not really just operating in a silo.
Understood, understood. That makes a lot of sense, Gary. So another question here is that this is pertaining to across the board, across different teams. You're saying that we need to tie it to a metric which they are measured on, probably a key performance indicator that they are measured on, so that you can look at the effectiveness of the training and saying that, hey, you're not even saying that this is the X amount of people completed. So instead, you're saying that with this, what has happened is that the completion rate has gone up. The not the completion rate, the closing rates have gone up. The attainment has gone up. The number of demos that was booked by the salesperson has gone up. Perhaps if it's a marketing team, the time to create a content is actually reduced because we are able to give them certain trainings on how to create a content effectively, maybe using AI. maybe in terms of the marketing team, the quality of the content that is being churned out is even better and has much more engagement. So these are things that I suppose that you're trying to convey, saying that we need to uh, tie it all to the performance indicators of those individual teams, and that is what this whole exercise is all about, right?
Yeah, I think it is because we want folks to be invested in learning. We don't want them necessarily like obviously there is mandatory like there's compliance training that needs to happen so you don't get fined by a governmental agency. So,
Mhm.
but like with some of the supplemental training, it's really necessary to get that buy-in so that both the learners and leadership can say, all right, this is impactful to me. This affects my KPIs. This
Right.
affects my performance review. Like this really does have a measurable impact for me, and I feel good coming out of this.
Got it, got it, got it. Gary, so another thing is that because we are talking about how L&D teams can position themselves as teams that is delivering a lot of value, and that is also mentioning or keeping a highlight within the organizations, saying that we are a team which is not just a cost center, but adding a lot of values, right? Now, one part of it is to for these L&D professionals to build strong relationship with the key decision makers or the management of the organization. Do you have any strategies or tips and tricks where on how an L&D professional can build strong relationship with decision makers or the management within an organization?
Yeah, I think this is a really good point of saying like why the question then becomes like why does a decision maker, why does an executive care about learning and development programs? And with that, I think we go back to kind of something I brought up a little earlier about is about the business and about business results and how it affects the bottom line. Of like the example I was giving before about, all right, we're L&D isn't just a cost center to your point, Andre. It's increasing our revenue with the sales training, or it's decreasing cost in some way too. So another way to say, all right, this training has kept employees more engaged across this past year. So our employee turnover rate went down this year. And that's a pretty big cost center to save in term internally costs of new hires and training, getting them up to speed. And there's a way to quantify that. Each organization will be different on how they quantify that. But if you can draw a parallel there to show that to decision makers, we're also reducing risk. And to get a little boring with training content, if we go to compliance training, then compliance training is all there to reduce risk from getting fined or getting sued or getting lawsuits. And if you can draw a parallel to, all right, we saved X amount of dollars in fines this year that we would have incurred by not running this program through this through this LMS or through your L&D program, then that's a significant bonus. That's a significant benefit to say to executives, to leadership, that we're saving money because of we've reduced risk, we've decreased cost in some way, or we've increased revenue in some way. And I think when you put dollar signs into leadership's hands, that really gets attention. And it's not just about a competency model. It's really about the business bottom line. That gets everybody's attention. When you talk about money, I think it gets everybody's attention.
That is true. That is true. I suppose, yeah, all the businesses look at monetary benefits, and generally, it's all about the return on investment on any of the initiatives that you're doing, right? Which brings me to another question, right? The question is that is there any specific examples where you've seen an L&D initiative having a big measurable impact on an organization's success? Because I know that you've worked with a lot of clients and you've helped a lot of L&D teams on the process, right? I'm pretty sure you must have given them certain initiatives, or you must have seen them do certain initiatives which had an immeasurable impact. Do you think you can
Yeah.
shed some light on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I could talk through like the three. I keep coming back to this: increase revenue, decrease risk, reduce or increase revenue, decrease costs, reduce risk. And I think I have like one for each of them. Kind of the first one about increasing revenue is can really come back to sales training. So if we think of like there's a sales training model out there called like Medic, and if you can like a specific company trying to one of the companies I've worked with has tried to implement that model, and that's a pretty good like sales qualifying like model, and implementing that training both through the LMS, through cohort training with specific executive coaches going through that too, and having all their sales reps go through that, and they were able to show an increase in like sales qualified leads, and in terms of um, additional demos booked as well. So that's a measurable impact that the sales team that directly had. In regards to like decreasing cost, one thing I think a lot of people don't think of for decreasing cost is the amount of admin time that goes into doing basic tasks. So from a reporting side specifically, and thinking about how do we capture data in a way that an LMS admin or multiple LMS admins, depending on an organization, are running reports for anybody that says, I need a report. And that cost gets compounded the larger an organization gets. So one way that a team that I worked with did was creating this automation for reports so that would automatically get sent out to anybody that would request one. They set it up and it's automatically sent on a weekly or a monthly basis. And the other way too is pulling that data. A more complex solution is pulling the data into a BI tool so that it's on demand reporting. So anybody that might need a report that has access to it can go to this BI tool, pull the data, and the LMS admin is really the person that facilitates that by connecting all the correct systems into that tool. And then when we come back to reducing risk, we can talk about what I was mentioning earlier about like regulatory fines. So if you didn't, in say a healthcare company that needs to provide HIPAA training, if that HIPAA training doesn't get provided and there's some kind of breach in confidentiality, that those fines are pretty hefty. And specifically in the US, those fines are pretty intense. So they could draw a direct correlation of saying, we did not incur this amount of money in fines that we would have incurred in a scenario where we didn't provide this in a reportable, easily consumable way.
That was, Gary, I was quite astounded by the last part of compliance, right? Because I, we've never thought of that way where you provide a HIPAA training and this is the X amount of money being saved because you said there's no fines being put up, or you didn't incur any fines from the regulatory body. Because when an organization says that, hey, we want to do a HIPAA training, I think then, okay, we'll do it and we'll make it mandatory for all the people to go through it, right? But we never even think that this is the impact of that particular initiative. You said reducing risk. Because
And it comes to reporting, I think, too. It's like it's one thing to provide that training because you can provide that training on a PowerPoint slide if you really wanted to. But it's about the reportability of that to say, all right, when the regulatory agency comes in and says, did these folks do this training? You have a system of record that says, here's the proof that they actually did it.
yeah, so what I was astounded as is how you tied that fines as a benefit for doing this. That you saved X amount of money in fines because you did this particular training or made it mandatory. That is another way of looking at return on investment on a particular course or a particular initiative. That is a really good viewpoint, which I think for me it is quite new because usually when we look at the viewpoints, we don't look at that part of it. We always look at how did it possibly impact the particular team, but not on an organization as a whole. But this compliance training actually puts that into a bigger perspective. So thank you so much, Gary, for that particular insight, and I really appreciate it. So Gary, there's one last question, right? All of this is tying down saying that, hey, L&D is not just a function which is part of the HR team. Usually, in most companies, it is part of the HR team, right? And most of them think of it as a place where you go in, or a function where it looks at your development activities. It's just trainings and coachings and e-learning content that they do, right? And in this regard, what happens is that uh, I'm not really sure of how this works, but then again, how do these L&D professionals position themselves as a strategic thought leader within the organization? Because they want to be seen, they want to let the organization know that we deliver so much of value and that we would be great at as a strategic, or we deliver thought leadership within the organization. How do they do that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to really working closely. I'll position my own career here as like with your customer success manager, because they're going to be the folks that know the product, one, inside and out, and two, what every other customer of of your product is doing. And if they don't know directly, they have their peers that they can ask questions to. And the how the L&D professional can kind of position themselves is asking for like industry or best practices using the product, and best practices on what to measure too. I think that's another big part to say. A lot of L&D folks might come in saying, I don't know how I want to increase revenue, decrease costs, reduce risk, but you have all these other customers, customer success manager, that you can use to help me make the case that how I can impact the bottom line in some way. And I think they can position themselves by working alongside their like software or their CSM to build this. It could really just be as simple as one slide in like a PowerPoint to say, this is how I'm helping, that I'm having a direct impact on the business by doing these L&D programs, and just showcasing their work, bragging about what they're doing, and really sharing that to the other folks in their company. And then that only positions them well from a career standpoint, but it also positions them as like, I'm breaking out of my silo a bit. And I want to try and get collaboration from each of these other teams that I'm helping to provide training for. And you could really develop relationships, develop partnerships across teams. And I think that really positions you as a central piece in an organization's strategy, and just instead of just being in that silo creating training and doing the things some people might not always want to do.
That is that sounds really nice when you put it that way, Gary. So, when you're saying that you need to be checking with the customer success manager, you just did mention that as well, right? So you're saying in your case, it would be if your client or you're talking to an L&D person, they would ask you for industry relevant best practices and all of that. But if they don't have someone whom they can talk to, like yourself, they could possibly get it by what do you think are those source resources that they could look into? Do you think there's certain things which is available, or for you, do you have any references that you look at?
Yeah, so for me, I really look at the rest of my customer base as my start. But if, say, like to your point, if you don't have like a CSM that you can ask these questions to, I think networking is probably another good piece to like, there are so many LinkedIn groups for pretty much everything out there. And trying to find the little niche that like L&D in healthcare, like I'm sure there's a LinkedIn group for that. There's groups specifically for your domain in your industry out there, and just networking with those folks and really ask them what they're doing. I think that's really a great next step, honestly, if you don't have access to another person or you don't know where to start, really.
Perfect, perfect. I think that answers the question, right? Networking is key here. Finding groups, probably it's on LinkedIn groups, or you would be able to find different websites which have these individual groups. So getting into it, having conversations on it would really, really help to kind of strategize, identify things and trends in the market. That's a great point, Gary. The final question, I think, what I would pose to you, Gary, is that L&D teams, when you're looking at it, you have your employees, you have your L&D teams present. A lot of cases where the employees do not always think of L&D teams as enemies, because one is people do not like to keep on learning, right? Continuous learning is not something that everyone likes to do, and learning is not something that is really interesting for people, right? And this is one of the biggest challenges of the L&D team, right? Driving course completion. They need to keep on giving out a lot of reminders to them. Plus, the moment that you see an L&D team member, you probably dodge around, or you don't want to talk to them because you think of them as people giving you a lot of things to do. Now, how do you think L&D teams can make the transition, make people so interested to learn, right? When a course is being delivered, how do they say that, hey, when you do this course, you're going to have this end result, right? Because that is what it is, right? People want to understand the end result than getting just a course assigned, because they don't understand why this course is being assigned to them. Is there anything that the L&D team members or the professionals do to ensure that that is being conveyed so that it drives higher course completion?
Yeah, I think I like it's great, all good to be like, oh, learning is an altruistic good. We should all do it. And I buy into that myself, but I know like a lot of people don't. So I think it's really about saying what's in it for me. And like really putting it down to the learner. So why does the learner want to care about doing this? And I think we can pull some stuff in from like the bottom line. So if a L&D professional has the data to say, all right, by doing this training, you're going to get more leads, you're going to be able to book more demos, and thus your comp is going to go up when you do this, because historically this is what happened with other folks that have done this training. Or even if like it might not be always directly like that, but you could put it to the forefront to learners to say, this is how much on average a healthcare company gets fined for not completing regulatory information. And by you completing this, you're helping us as the company to save money on these fines. And I think really just painting the picture of the why and the why they want to do it, one, for their own benefit, or why they need to do it for the company's benefit. So it's clear, and it's not just something that's a to-do item that is wasting their time.
That is perfect. I think what you're trying to say is always mention why and the purpose of whatever training that you're assigning, not just send out a particular training without just telling them what is the reason for it or trying to enforce it through their managers, but giving them stats on how it has helped the other employees who have done it, plus stats on how it's helping the company as well, would give them that enough drive to go ahead and finish those courses, right? Yep, I think that was an interesting conversation, Gary, and we did have a nice conversation towards the end. So thank you so much, Gary, for joining us in this webinar. So, Gary, is there anything else that you would want to add in before we kind of wrap up?
No, the one concept I just want to drill home is that always tie really anything you do at work, I think specifically in L&D, to business results.
Mhm.
And if you can do that, I think you really establish yourself as a strategic partner. And the more you can do that, the more, one, your career will you'll do better in your career, and two, it'll really position you well within the company to succeed at your job.
Perfect, perfect. So ideally, tying everything that you do with the outcomes is what you're suggesting, right, Gary?
Absolutely.
All right, perfect, perfect. It was great talking to you, Gary. Thank you so much for joining in, and possibly we'll see you next time. So thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you, Andre.